Oh, cool. Okay.
So what were you saying?
So I was talking about Poverty Canyon, the history of Poverty Canyon, which is very interesting here in Carpinteria. Thank you. Well, we're at the grand opening of Rincon Brewery, by the way, which is awesome. You should really come here. So we were talking about Poverty Canyon and how it used to be a pig farm.
Now, where is it? Near Casitas Pass?
This is on the Casitas Pass on Highway 150 between Carpinteria and Ojai. So it's in the little isolated valley. The reason they call it Poverty Canyon is because it was the last hideout of the Chumash. It was the last place the Spaniards found the Chumash. They were actually basically isolated themselves in this very hard to get to valley. It has high ridges on both sides and a really narrow access to the ocean. So I don't know the exact date, but when the Chumash were found there, they were in a pretty dire situation. They were disconnected from the ocean, which is their main food source. They had all the diseases that had been introduced or whatever brought over, so they weren't doing too hot. And so that's why they called it Poverty Canyon. I don't know the entire history. The next piece of history I know is that the property was owned by a man named Otto Hopkins, who was also a restaurateur, and he had a speakeasy in Santa Barbara back in the 30s and 40s on, I think it was Chapala, or one of the streets downtown. I can't remember the exact address. I'm pretty sure they called it the Cotton Club, actually, and they served alcohol to minorities, to Asians and Mexicans. He had the first trash routes in Montecito. That was his thing. He was the trash routes. He was a trash man. So he had like the McCormick estate and the I think the Whack estate, but all these really old names in Montecito, and back in those days, back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, there was just dry and wet waste. So there wasn't any plastic. There was just basically metal, wood, glass, or food. And so they would separate their waste according to whether it was dry or wet. Most wet waste was food. So he would get all the wet waste, steam distill it, like steam sterilize it. He had some sort of factory, I don't know, probably not a very complicated factory. But then he raised hogs with all of the trash from Montecito. So this is a long-winded explanation of how we're basically resurrecting this hog farm in Casitas Valley, which started with Otto Hopkins, this African-American prize fighter who's, by some tale, he was 6'6", 250 pounds, and he owned 400 acres in that little valley, and nobody would mess with him.
In Antelope Valley?
No, in the Poverty Canyon.
Poverty Canyon?
The Poverty Canyon. He owned the whole Poverty Canyon, and it was a dump back in the up to the 60s. They Poverty Canyon specifically, the exact Poverty Canyon is where the dump was. It's up one of the little side canyons, the fingers.
If you're going up 150, is it off to the left?
Yes, it's off to the left. It's the Los Salsas Creek watershed, and it comes out at like oil piers at like Seacliff exit on the 101. So that's where all those where all the refineries are, and the police station, fire department. So that's the watershed that leads back to Poverty Canyon. And so Otto Hopkins basically started a pig farm there back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, sold to Farmer John and Oscar Mayer down in L.A. And Oscar Mayer and Farmer John in L.A., that's who he was supplied. So I think he had, by some accounts, 1,000 hogs out there at any one point. So now, just last year, Warren Brush, actually it was 2 years ago, more or less a year and a half ago, Warren Brush, a colleague of mine, he started a Quail Springs permaculture farm out in Cuyama. He got an investor to buy a piece of property out there, which had avocados and apples and a creamery, and then we threw some pigs on there also as sort of an ancillary crop, because the pigs would eat the spoiled apples, the apples with all the bugs in them. They could eat the cheese. If any cheese went bad, you'd feed it to the pigs. They'd eat the whey. So actually the pigs are kind of like, they're like sanitizers of the farm. They take all the waste. And so we had all this extra, the apples were full of worms, so we fed them to the pigs and they get walnuts. And then they're getting the brewery mash from Rincon Brewery and Island Brew. That's another, probably the largest source of their diet is the brewery mash. And so now they're being served here as bratwurst. Happy pigs. Happy pigs come from Poverty Canyon, Cedars Valley Farm.
And you are?
My name is Loren Luyendyk, and I own Santa Barbara Organics, and I do organic farm management and conversions. So you can check me out at santabarbaraorganics.com.
Santa Barbara Organics. Okay.
That's
How do you
right.
spell your last name?
It's spelled Luyendyk, and my first name is Loren.
Thanks, Loren. Good story.
Yeah, thanks, Larry.
Okay, that was a good rehearsal. Should we go for it now?